Hi everyone, welcome to the Be the Vessel podcast. My name is Daniel and I play the roles of channeler and intuitive psychologist, aiming to bridge all aspects of the healing arts while navigating my return journey to the stars. I interview those journeying through all aspects of healing, whether that be from more traditional Western frames or from a more spiritual or spirit-based connection. What I always find is that everyone is a bridge between worlds, a universe unto themselves, and a unique light that shines brightly for the collective. If you like what you hear and are interested in more of my offerings, consider joining the Be the Vessel community at patreon.com/Dr. Daniel Atkins, where you will find various unique offerings, bonus content, and podcasts such as my own channeled information and the new Be the Vessel healing series. May you find what you're looking for and remember the light within. And lastly, the views in this episode do not represent my personal views, nor are they to be taken as medical advice or scientific fact. Always do your own research, come to your own conclusions, and trust your own guidance. Trishana Suman is an empowerment guide and mentor. She has delved into diverse spiritual practices, including studying under shamans in Peru and California, exploring the Chakra System, learning Tantric and Taoist techniques, and using human design and gene keys to understand her unique path while supporting others in understanding their own. With over 5 years of experience in providing personalized guidance to clients, Trishana's path is one of supporting and guiding others along their spiritual and human journey. Alongside her spiritual journey, she has also dedicated over a decade to government service and now supports conscious businesses through SEO Marketing. I met Trishana back in March and immediately felt resonant energy as someone on a similar 6'2" profile journey, which you will learn more about if you don't already know. I was looking for someone to go deeper with into human design and gene keys, and I found her. If you would like to know more about Trishana's personal journey, refer back to part 1 where we explore her own mystical adventure that led her here. I'm now excited to share part 2 of an ongoing series of conversations with Trishana regarding all things human design and gene keys. This time we aim to start from the beginning and approach human design from the ground up, though we take many twists and turns along the way as Trishana and I get lost and found in our own inspirations, sacral responses, and mind melding. If you are looking for a linear style of teaching, you might look elsewhere. But if you enjoy our musings, rabbit holes, and learn as we go style, this may be the series for you. She and I could talk for hours on end, probably because we are so similar in our designs. And this is precisely the co-created space for us to satisfy those urges. We hope you enjoy the ride as much as we do. Please enjoy this second episode with Trishana Suman as we explore the foundations of human design, get lost in the details, and discover more about ourselves in the process. May this episode be a gift, an invitation, and a medicine to discover your own design, follow your inner authority, and respond to what the universe is calling forth. Hi, Trishana.
Hey.
I am so happy to have you back on here. Um, the I'm still not sure how I'm gonna release it all. The listeners have not yet heard our initial
Okay.
episode, which was so beautiful. Such an amazing journey getting to hear all about your story. And then at the tail end, just after like the 2-hour mark, just
Yeah.
decided to dive headfirst into human design. And then after
Mhm.
I was like, man, it's such a potent, I mean, we were just talking about really deep, before I hit record, really deep like stories and sci-fi and things. And like human design and gene keys, it's a whole world. It's a whole world. You
Mhm.
really need, I learned, I was like, oh, we need more time. I'm not gonna
Yes.
like cram this in at the end of our first episode.
Yeah,
So
wouldn't be
now
possible.
um so I was guided to wait a little while and really to come back to just to this time. I was talking about sort of the arrival energy of this month, and I was being guided to this time for our second conversation all along. So I trust that it's in alignment, and I'm excited to start from the origins and to dive
Mm.
and to have a lot more space for the beautiful teachings and modalities of human design and gene keys, which you work with and you know quite
Yeah.
well and are such an intimate part of your story, which people will get to hear when I release that first part. Um, but so to jump in here to the beginning, to sort of the roots
To
and
the
to
beginning.
yeah, to set the stage, for human design, because there's a lot of probably people will be a bit familiar, at least the listeners of this podcast, but there's such intricate language and definition that it seems like it will be really good just to lay a foundation and even just to tell a little bit of an origin story. So, I don't know how much you know about the figure known as Ra, or Alan Robert
Mhm.
Krakauer, if I'm pronouncing his name right. This
Yeah.
Canadian guy who um just was appeared to just be living his life. I was just reading a little bit about him, kind of started to retreat from life a bit, went off to Ibiza, and then
Mhm.
just had this sort of clairvoyant download experience that he
Yeah.
referred to as the voice. Um and human design came through. So I'll just open it up for you. I don't know how much you know about those origins or him, or how much you've learned from him directly, but anything you'd like to say about the origin from Ra?
Yeah, yeah, totally. So when you were mentioning that, a precursor story to that experience
Oh,
arose in my
yes. Okay.
mind.
Even prior. Perfect. Go back
Yeah,
further.
and so I think it kind of touches on, let's say the profile aligns with the transpersonal karma versus the personal karma, and it's also on this deeper energetic microcosm, macrocosm level. It really touches on the nuance of what we are experiencing collectively and the ripple effect of, let's just say, in a mundane way to put it, those that can hear you and those that can't. Um, and in particular, when it comes to transpersonal karma, how like the most seemingly random person crossing the street at that whatever particular point in time can create a huge ripple effect in our lives. And so one story I remember reading about Ra in particular is that, I can't remember exactly where he was, but he ran into some random person. I think it was at some transit place. It was like bus station, train station. I can't recall exactly, but this random person uh, mentioned Ibiza to him out of the blue, seemingly, and he had no intention of going there. So that led him on the trajectory to go there. And through some other series of events, he found himself in a ruina, so essentially like a cave-like structure in Ibiza. This was January 87. And
Right around when a year before both of our births.
totally, yeah, totally. And this is also the same time period that some of my teachers have referenced as when the harmonic convergence happened. So this is like another thing, but essentially it was a time and place and a potent time period on the planet for a lot of spiritual energy and a lot of capacity for downloads in different ways to come through for the information for the humans on this planet. So it's interesting how it's like similar. And yeah, he went in and there's if you wanted to dive deeper into the actual full story, I'm sure you can find the information on YouTube.
Yeah.
From my experience, what I can recall is that he essentially went into what seemed like a trance-like experience.
Mm-hmm.
His dog, because he had a dog with him, at one point he thought his dog had died because it was just not moving. It became inanimate essentially, and went through this 7-day experience of being in this channel and seeing this light and just getting these downloads of information. Like, I love what you mentioned in the beginning. It's most of the stuff that we see about human design on the surface level of the internet and social media and so on. It's just one fraction
Totally. It's
of
like
the
the
depth.
topsoil layer.
Totally, yeah. And it's like when you actually read this, you can see that he was getting like very specific um, scientific information about the nature of reality. Um, there's a whole cosmology that goes along with it. And it's like
Yeah,
very detailed, you can't
right.
make this shit up. Like,
No, like
excuse my language.
because I started, I started learning a little bit. I was like, cursory from the out. This is how I am with different frameworks. I'm, I'm like sort of peeking in from the outside, like, oh, I don't know if it's for me, and like my Scorpio part is like, yeah, I don't know. That's no, I'm good. That seems weird. Like I got my own thing.
Mm,
And then as time goes by, I'm like, ooh, this is actually, I hear one thing and I'm like, wait a second, this goes so deep. There's just
yeah,
all this, there's this history, there's this prediction, like the cosmology you talked about, like the evolution of humanity, like all this stuff that just
yeah,
totally lit me up and was so fascinating. So,
totally.
yeah, there's so many layers.
Yeah, yeah. And so it's like all this whole download of information within, 7 days. Um, and like coming out of it. At one point, this part's really interesting. I recall him saying that he looked down at his body and he saw a bunch of scales.
Mm,
Like a part of his body had become all scales. And I think there's a some or from my experience, there's been like a generalization of what that has meant previously to people. But what we were talking about earlier, and I don't think this piece was recorded, but in regards to like aliens and other beings, I think there's in all species of beings, human, extraterrestrial, whatever, there's like um, good and bad, so to speak. I would never generalize one certain species of any beings as being negative or so on. But anyways, I like it was so interesting to hear the scales part. And so he comes out of the channel. And then his dog comes back to life, interestingly enough.
yeah.
So yeah, so it's just such a curious story. And I think just even sharing that bit with people, I think people who are probably more on the skeptical side would think like, oh, this guy channeled it. Okay, like who knows? Maybe it's made up. But like I said, if you actually go in and like get a hold of what's called like the white book or the black book and just read the details of information, and then, there are a bunch of other institutions as well that professionally teach it. You can see like, oh no, he was being imparted with some data that is relevant to like the way that our reality works and the way that we can according to this framework, most optimally function in who and what we are.
Yeah, and like you said, when it comes to like hearing about people downloading something or channeling something, like it's always so helpful to if you can find video of the person themselves and feel their energy, feel the character, because
Yes.
we're all judging people's character to see. We were just talking
Yeah.
about trust a bit before too. Like, it's all about, can I trust this person? Because everything is a
Yeah.
story. We're always telling stories. And at the end of the day, even if you're looking at some evidence-based research or something, like you're gonna a part of you is gonna make up whether you trust what you're seeing
Totally.
or what you're hearing.
Totally.
And
Totally.
I was literally just watching some videos. I'd never really seen Ra speak before, anything like that. I mean, like, he called himself Ra, but he's a normal guy. He's like a Canadian guy,
Yeah.
he's not like some pretending to
Yeah.
be some crazy guru. Like, and just hearing him speak about it, he seemed like a um pretty grounded figure,
Yeah.
like kind of speaking about his own skepticism in nature and how mind-blowing the experience was and just sort of sharing that
Hmm.
experience. And then, when you see what has been produced, it's like, well, it
I
had to
know.
come from somewhere. Like this guy, it
Exactly.
wasn't he didn't spend a lifetime studying this. It's just there's
Yeah.
so much. There's so much. Um so yeah, and yeah, like you said, like if people want to dive deeper into that, they can find it online, but it felt like a nice point just to hear what which is a lot,
Yeah.
and I figured you would know. Um, but so from here, I'll give you a choice, like, we could speak to sort of the the foundations of what is sort of combined or integrated in human design, like astrology, the I Ching, Vedic philosophy, among other things, just to sort of set a frame for the different aspects that are combined or utilized, or any other way that you think would be helpful to lay the foundation.
Yeah. I feel like going into the details of it would be good. I guess I do want to touch on the importance of information being great. And I mean, obviously, I love information and just the learning process and like having an understanding, right? It's just not information for the sake of information, but like I feel like the core, like the core tenet, if you will, of human design. And I feel like the information guides us towards it, but ultimately it all comes back to our own inner authority and our own inner awareness. So this is why sometimes I believe too, like a lot of people who have no idea about human design, if they are still, or they had the opportunity and they're living in the right environment and just the right domino effect of events have happened for them to live as themselves, like truly, and have an awareness of it, maybe not consciously from a feedback loop of a framework, but like from their own inner awareness. That's ideally like the goal, so to speak, of this. But just I wanted to say that, and I can elaborate more on that afterwards.
I
But
think that I'll interrupt and say, I think that's a really beautiful way to begin this conversation because I was literally, like I said, I was just watching some clips of Ra and he's speaking too to the idea that so much of this frame, there's so much information, but so much of it is about just learning to be you and
yeah.
honoring you and trusting your own guidance wherever it shall
hmm
lead.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And like even for example, when I do readings, a lot of the clients I work with, I don't feel like I'm telling people really anything new. I feel like I'm maybe articulating it in a different packaged way for them to understand, but really like 70 to 80% of the information in retrospect, they're like, "Oh yeah. Okay, it makes sense why I do this. It makes sense why I feel this way or think this way." It's kind of like permission to be yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And having, like I said, that reflective feedback loop from an outside being, reaffirming like these could be aspects of you, take what resonates, leave what doesn't. Um, but see, how you feel about it based off of your own experience, your own reality, your own perspective of what's happening, from an embodied place and not just this conditioning of like what we think we should be thinking, what we think we should be doing. And I mentioned this previous video too, and I'm digressing a little bit, but it's like the mind it can be the outer authority for people, but it's not our own authority. It's not the decision making impetus. It's like here to gather information and see the world in different ways and analyze things, all depending on your design. But yeah, I felt like that piece was important
Yeah,
to
well,
share.
and that feels like another really important sort of foundational piece as well, is that a lot of the basis of human design, as in, with much spiritual literature, philosophy, the healing arts in general, is recognizing this complexity and conditioning of this mind that we have. And, I was
Yeah.
just hearing Ra speak to, like, pay honoring um this machine of the body that we have, which
Mm,
is, some might interpret that sort of a bit deceptively as meaning just honoring the physical, but the
hmm
body is much more than the fit. The body has layers. It has this, we could go into the energetic, which we will, and
Yeah,
sort of the
totally.
natural wisdom and intelligence, and things that I feel like it's always a bit tricky when you start to talk about mind and body because as you start to explore, the boundaries slip through your fingers. But basically, I
Yeah.
think what we could say is the thinking that we've been subscribing to our whole lives, typically as this one voice that tends to have its own agenda, tends to think it knows how to get things done, figure things out, has and
Yeah.
for a lot of us it doesn't work super well. There's a lot
Yeah,
has It's very
totally.
fear-based, it's very conditioned based on ideas that we thought were ours but turn out not necessarily are. So just laying that foundation that this is about discovering a guidance system that lives beyond that conditioned thinking.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I love the way that you mentioned that too. As you were saying that, I was like, I saw the image of like trying to find the proof or the right and wrong out here versus like in here.
Hmm.
Yeah, and attuning to that, and like having that interdependent relationship versus um yeah, just being so in that state of conditioning. And I feel like so many of us we have been unraveling that, right? And becoming like coming more into our sovereignty and in different ways through these frameworks. And yeah, exploring what that looks like and feels like to us.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, well, I'll give you a couple options then because we could, it could be a natural thread just to explore, because this came up last time actually too, just to explore what human design means by conditioning, because that could be one way to start to talk about sort of the self versus the not self,
Yeah.
which is kind of one of the bases of the human design journey, or to talk about sort of the different aspects and frameworks that are combined. I'll leave it up to you.
Okay, cool. Well, I will answer your initial question that you asked in the
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
beginning and give a little bit, and then yeah, I think we can just see where that flows
Let's do
naturally.
it.
Cool, cool. So yeah, as you mentioned previously, the human design system consists of a few different frameworks. It's the Chinese I Ching, which is I believe, 3,000-year-old divination tool, a part of what's called the Book of Changes. This is where it originated, if you will. I feel like it was also probably channeled, as more
Probably
discovered
everything in its
instead of
origin was
created.
channeled.
Yeah, 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 totally, totally. And so it incorporates the I Ching and then the Vedic Brahmic chakra system. But what's interesting too, and I think I mentioned this previously in the first video, is that when you look at the chakra system throughout in its evolution throughout time, you'll see that it's went from 3 to 5 to 7, which is like the standard one that you hear about now. And in the human design chart, it's actually 9, which is kind of cool. So it indicates the evolution on this energetic level as well of our physiology, on the physical, but also on these other subtle layers too. Along and it's so we have the I Ching, we have the Hindu Brahmic chakra system, and then we have astrology, which I imagine most everyone's familiar with now, whether they believe it or not.
Yeah. And if they listen to this
Um,
podcast, I interview tons of astrologers. So.
oh, okay, okay, cool. So yeah, it's an incorporation of all of them. Of course, the rave I Ching is slightly different than the regular I Ching, and it's just by I I'm almost positive it's just based off of this one hexagram in particular and this one line. But really, it was like, according to Ra, he didn't have awareness of the I Ching previous to the channel, but he was able to get all this information of 64 gates, 64 hexagrams, and the lines, and like just get it to pretty much a T. There was a very, very strong resemblance to with the subtle definitions of each of the hexagrams, each of the lines, and so on. So yeah, it comprises of all of these frameworks. And as I mentioned, it's kind of a tool for you to learn, I don't even know if it's the right word. Remember, maybe is a better word, to be yourself and what that looks like and how that manifests. And along with knowing, at least this is my perspective of it, it's like knowing the medicine that we have for each other, the unique medicine and the medicine in our uniqueness that we have for each other versus feeling like we need to be doing everything like Jane or Joe, or that we should be similar or should think the same. And this is why I love the awareness of this framework too, especially when it comes to like relationships of any kind, parents, especially intimate relationships. Knowing yourself and your own uniqueness can be so helpful, at least for myself. And maybe everyone's experienced this to a certain extent, but it's kind of like I've noticed this theme of like almost expecting people to think like me or see things like me, or in relationships, like, why doesn't this person do X, Y, and Z? But it's like not everyone's designed that way. And one really beautiful thing that Ra mentions about love in particular is like real love, true love is just loving someone for who they are. And I feel like this is such a key missing piece that many of us might experience when it comes to our relationships. I know I'm also digressing now into relationships, but it feels important. Felt important to share that.
It feels like, you're circling around one of the most ultimately the most beautiful and deepest aspects of this modality is, like we said, learning to be ourselves, and therefore learning to allow other people to be themselves too, which is part of the
Yeah.
equation. If we want freedom to honor our own design, we are therefore invited to um accept
Yeah.
others in their own design, which is, you could say, is one definition of unconditional love without the
Yeah.
conditions or expectations that people be
Totally.
other than who we are, or that we be
Mm-hmm.
other than who we are. And I think it also alludes to that aspect of mind, which one of those
Hmm.
functions of mind is the anxiety of who we believe we need to be in any given moment, which in
Yeah,
and of
that piece.
itself is like, no, you don't need to believe anything. You
Yeah,
just are.
yeah.
You just
Exactly.
who
It's not
would
a
you
mental
right?
thing that can be changed.
Who would you be if you didn't have a belief about who you should? That's really,
Yeah.
so I feel like that's like such a beautiful um deep frame. And I already sense we'll like weave in and out of the sort of the emotional depth of it and back into the
Mm.
information. And I'll just guide us back into the information for a second, because
Yeah.
one of, I think such the crucial elements of the information, which can just, I think, be a little overwhelming or confusing when people hear about it, is
Yeah.
the 64 hexagrams and the
Yeah.
lines. And because that is so important, right?
Totally.
The
It's
gauge,
such a
like
big
it's
piece.
such a big part. But I remember when I heard it, I'm
Totally.
like, I don't even know what a hexagram is. It's like a shape, like what?
Yeah.
So and I know that then Gene Keys is based off those, that same
Yes.
64 hexagrams. So
Yeah.
maybe we could just spend a little time like, what are these 64
Cool.
hexagrams, like like aspects, traits of who we can be, that kind of thing, and then the
Yeah.
lines as well.
Okay, cool. So I believe the shape thing is called a hexagon.
Oh
It's similar to
yeah.
the hex. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right.
No,
Good
I was
call.
like, what is it? Yeah, yeah. No, but hexagram, I like forgot until you said that. But the hexagram, so like I said, the I Ching is comprised of 64 hexagrams. So a hexagram, hex being six, they're alternating either yin or yang lines. So yin is a dashed line, two dashes, and a yang is a solid line. So essentially feminine and masculine. And they're alternating in different combinations of six, right? Of sets of six in order to create 64. So the alternation of these two different kinds of lines can create a hexagram with 64 possibilities. And so what's interesting, and I love, yeah, this goes into the gene keys, is that there are also 64 codons in our DNA. And when you break it down, I actually did this when I was in Bali. I went into like a rabbit hole and I was like, okay, let's look at this. And when you look at the genetic sequence and you look at the yin and yang lines and you look at the codons and what they're made of, the codons also have what's called base pairs. So in the hexagrams as well, there are like um, the way that when the lines of a hexagram change, they create another hexagram. It's the way that they relate to one another. So each one has base pairs. So it's a lot of rabbit hole information. But the point I'm making is that there is a correlation between these 64 hexagrams and our 64 codons. And like I said, the Book of Changes, which is where the hexagrams originated, channeled through, came from,
Hmm.
it's 3,000 years old. So I mean, that's technically way before modern science had discovered,
Yeah.
uh, these codons in our DNA. And so with the gene keys too, it's really cool how all of this combines. And just to give a little preface, Richard Rudd, which was the channeler synthesizer of the gene keys, was a student of Ra's. And so that's how he came across the human design information. And then he channeled, synthesized this other framework. And with the keys, it's the idea that We have all 64 codons in our DNA. Every single human
Oh, so
does.
what is a codon?
A codon is, this is a good question, and I'm like, am I gonna have to Google this? It's so it's a series of so in our genetic sequence, and I'm probably gonna have to fact check this afterwards, but I'm just gonna say it how I remember it and then correct it if I'm wrong. So in our genetic sequence, it's made up of A, C, T, and G. And so the whole genome is a combination, or not a combination, but it's like an assortment of these A, C, T, and Gs. And so,
I'm gonna read what I see online real quick, and
okay,
maybe that'll help you.
perfect.
A codon
Cool.
is a yeah, because this goes so deep. So already we can see that like there are so many facets to this because it's on the level of, let's say, our traits, our personality, our emotionality, but then it very quickly, we find ourselves going to the level of like DNA sequencing and
Yes.
biology and like energetics, and it's like
Yeah.
mechanistic. So I think some people
Yeah, that's a good
miss
word
that
for it.
part, but it goes as deep as you can go.
Totally.
So a codon is a sequence of 3 DNA or RNA nucleotides that
Okay, there we go.
corresponds with a
Nucleotides.
specific amino acid or stop signal during protein synthesis. DNA
Okay.
and RNA molecules are written in a language of 4 nucleotides. Meanwhile, the language of proteins includes 20 amino acids. So
Awesome.
that's already over my head, but
Yeah.
whatever you'd like to do with that is fine.
Yeah. So if we're to look at the image of a genetic sequence of a strand of DNA, you'd see that there are these codons that connect. And so if you were to look at the image of the connecting codons, the hexagrams also correlate to the way that these codons connect, along with amino acids that is created through the combination of the particular hexagrams, the particular codons. And so in the gene keys, there are certain amino acids which create what's called the codon rings, and this is going into like another rabbit hole. So I'll
And
go
that
back to
like
the
that's
original.
more like the codon ring stuff, would you say, and maybe the codons in general, would you say that's more gene keys specific?
Yes, so that's more gene keys specific.
Yeah.
Although there is a book called Codon Mapping, which kind of touches on this more scientific, physiological, biological, genetic aspect
Yeah.
of human design as well. Um, so that there's that layer as well. And I think that's more in between.
And I will, and like this is actually what started to honestly draw me in, because I started to read, because I have the 50/50 gene key. So like I started to
Yeah.
read all, and maybe we'll get to that, but all about, like, I don't know if you call that the cosmology or the predictive evolutionary
Mm-hmm.
quality. Like I started to get so into that. But maybe for this layer of the foundation, maybe what we
Yeah.
could say is a big takeaway here is that these 64 hexagrams like have this intimate sort of synchronous connection to our DNA. Like it's
Yes, our physiology. Yeah.
the number sequencing is sort of paralleled or replicated in the body, and that's
Yeah.
just incredible even to think about that this channeled information has connections there.
Yeah.
And um maybe we'll get into that, and because we're gonna spend more time with the gene keys too, so maybe we'll get into
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, maybe we can just circle back to the 64 hexagrams and how that applies in the other aspects of human design.
Yeah, yeah. So pertaining to human design, you
Mm,
wanted to focus
yeah,
on?
yeah, yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
cool. I kind of did want to finish the thought
Yeah,
about
go ahead.
the
Whatever
gene
you want.
keys that I
Whatever you
wanted
want.
to.
Do what you
Okay,
want.
cool. Well, the point the point I was making, or that was the point I was getting to initially, was that the idea is that we have all of these aspects, right? These all of the keys, all of the potentials, the hexagrams in our body according to gene keys. And one really great quote that I love that one of my old supervisors had said to me is that when one person raises consciousness, it raises the consciousness of the whole, even if it's just a little bit.
Hmm.
So it's a similar concept with the gene keys. It's the idea that even though based off of our birth chart, we have certain keys right? Based off of the astrological placements that we had at birth, we have certain keys that are more attuned to our blueprint. Still, it's like we have all these keys within us. We have all of these potentials within us.
Just like some might say, we have all the signs of the zodiac within
Yeah.
us. We just,
Mm-hmm.
based on the planetary alignments, we're more aligned with the energies of some. Sort of
Yeah.
that compose our personality at an energetic level.
Totally. Yeah. And so like when you're working on the ones that are specific to you and specific to your archetype, it's still even supporting the expansion of the collective. This is like the idealist perspective of it.
Yeah, well,
Um,
also like the idea that all from the soul perspective, all we can really do is heal ourselves, and that
yeah,
is the
exactly.
mission, like what you might call
Exactly.
the transpersonal mission that actually supports the collective as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And so to go back to the original or the other question that you had,
Well, and so let me
um,
just let me draw
yeah, yeah, go ahead.
a through line because
Hmm.
you jumped into gene keys, which I
Yeah.
love, but just to clarify, because I sense you're going to go back to this, when you're talking about the keys, and that we may
Uh-huh.
have resonance with, like that's based on the same 64 hexagrams, right? That is also the what human design would call the gates that compose our
Exactly.
chart, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I want to make an important point here is that me in my unique design, the way that I've operated, the way that feels aligned for me, I'm all about finding the connection points between the different frameworks. I've even felt this way about religion and so on. I know that doesn't work for everyone. I know there can be a lot of people that's like, especially in the human design gene keys community, it's like, no, human design, that's it. Gene keys is whatever. Gene keys, it's like, no, this is what
Well, to
we've,
me, I mean, I am literally that way. Like that's so much what this podcast is drawing the through lines. That to me,
yes,
it lights me up because there's so
totally.
much conviction in that. Just like you were mentioning the I Ching hexagrams and the DNA sequencing. Like I just love the overlapping synchronicity and alignment.
Yeah, totally. And it's like, for me, it's silly to imply that this is the only truth. This is the only truth. It's like, no, it's yes, and. And so I'm just saying this to say, I think some people will resonate with finding the threads and connections between all of them, and some people won't. And for me, it's just like, yeah, gathering data and information and having a better understanding of something, a more holistic understanding of something. So going back to the I Ching, as you were mentioning, one important piece it feels for me to express is that it's called the Book of Changes, and essentially it is a indication or a guide or a map, perhaps. It's maybe a 5D map, a 4D map of
Hmm.
how change moves through time and space in our matrix reality.
Mm.
So it's like when you do a I Ching reading, it kind of gives you an idea of the potentials of the perspective energy based off of the now. And so this
So
is
it
how
can
it works.
it can be kind of like a predictive tool, but not just in the linear like this is what's going to happen next, but almost in like the what you would call it like sort of the multiverse quantum way of like there's
Yeah,
many timelines. Time isn't actually linear. This is a space-time
yeah,
fabric, and so we're working with this sort of multidimensional um multiple pathways as to where life can go. That kind of thing,
yes.
would you say?
Yeah, totally. Uh-huh. Yep. And it's like it's this the quantum entanglement thing comes to mind where it's like our state at the moment too can also energetically shift the outcome
Totally.
as well,
Right.
So
We
there's
can
it's a
shift the future,
dance,
we
it's
can
a
shift the
dance.
past, we can everything
Yeah.
is yeah, flexible, pliable.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Yeah. So in the human design system, the 64 hexagrams of the I Ching are called the gates,
Mhm.
and each of the gates, depending on what planetary influences there are in your chart, for example, I was born on July 11th. The sun was by hexagram 53. And based off of the time I was born, at the time of day, it was line 6. So So that whole concept too, that I love this part of it, is that the quantum like neutrino stream that is moving, the energy moving through all things,
So
was being filtered.
just just to find because
I
I know you're gonna there's gonna be
love.
some words that just pop in and I'm like, oh, we need to we need to just give
Okay,
a brief
maybe just
blurb because when you say neutrino stream, I know people are
yeah.
like, wait, what?
What?
So
Okay.
is that is that just what Ra is that the language Ra used to describe like the fundamental units of like life force energy or what or how what is the neutrino
Yeah,
stream?
well, that's an actual or I don't know if it's well known, but it's a known scientific term
Oh,
in
okay.
quantum physics.
Okay.
So I will just read you this little blurb. I'm like, let me look it up and I'll just
Yeah,
say the
yeah, yeah, yeah,
technical.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
it's tens, this is an explanation from the Department of Energy.
Okay.
Tens of trillions of neutrinos from the sun stream through your body every second, but you can't feel them. So it goes on saying
So
theorists predict.
it's like the units of what I might call like I might say light source consciousness, but we could say sort of units of light from the sun.
It's so let me look up exactly what is a
Because
neutrino.
I thought this maybe just came from Ra, but it didn't. This is
No,
reference
this is,
to sort of
yeah, it's
quantum
like
physics
actual
and energy.
quantum
Okay,
mechanics, yeah.
cool, very cool.
So, and I'm gonna read the technical definition here.
Yeah.
Um, so a neutrino is a fermion that interacts only via the weak interaction in gravity. Um, It's named so because it is electrically neutral and because its rest mass is so small that it was long thought to be zero. Okay, hang
So
on,
it's
there's
kind
one
of
more.
it's got to be similar to what we're calling the basic the smallest units of matter and energy, which are like photon, electron.
Yeah, so it's similar to an electron essentially, but it has no electrical charge. And
Okay.
it's just a very, very small mass. But it's like one of the most abundant particles in the universe.
So would you say almost like if you wanted to go deeper into a layer beneath where we may typically speak of the smallest units of matter, you know, like particle wave
Yeah, like
duality of like
quarks
electron.
and
Yeah, we would go maybe go to neutrino, which starts to get into just almost, I don't know, pure energy light, the deeper layer of
yeah.
energetics.
Totally, yeah. So it's
Okay,
like the
cool.
actual quantum mechanical things that exist in our reality. So essentially, as we discovered, neutrinos are like electrons, but they don't have a charge and they come streaming out of the sun. And so the sun always forever shining. Thank you, sun. Um, the neutrinos coming out of it are filtered through the hexagram, so through the gates, right? A hexagram, aka gate. And so the time and place and date that you were born, the planets were in a particular place. So it's like these neutrinos come streaming through, filtered through the planets, filtered through the hexagrams, and they create an imprint. So this is the idea of like our birth chart, our human design chart, any astrological chart. It's the imprint of what was happening the moment that we came out from our mother's womb into fully into this 3D reality as a sovereign individual form.
Yeah. Yeah, let's just pause there for a second because this really does, you know, this transcends many modalities that the point of birth is very important energetically for the imprint of our design, our composition, our personality. And you know, sort of independent of these frames, I started channeling. When I was channeling, when I first started channeling, I was getting a lot of information that, you know, even like the idea of ancestral lineage and epigenetics and things like that, which I consciously think are very important and find fascinating. But the channeled information I was receiving was like, you're not giving enough credit to like you know, this imprint from
Yeah,
the celestial bodies from the start. Like this
totally.
actually really is what creates the composition. And it's all intertwined. Like that's going to
Mm-hmm.
relate to the ancestral lineages. Like, but from a soul perspective, like it was designed so you would be born here, so you could receive the the cosmic energies. So I want to say that. And so then let me also clarify. So, because when you're talking about being born during these certain gates and things like that, it's the gates are overlaid on what people would recognize as the zodiac wheel in astrology, right?
Yeah.
So so based on where the
Yeah.
planets are, which would create your natal birth chart in astrology, will also create where the certain gates are that make up your human design and the keys in your gene keys.
Yeah.
And let me also just ask, because this was flitting around my brain. So the neutrinos from the sun. So would you say, or is it said then that not only is it the imprint, but we are created from light, like we come from the sun,
Mm.
like we are these
That's a very
neutrinos?
beautiful, yeah, that's a very beautiful, almost like poetic way of
Yeah.
looking at it. I honestly I hadn't thought of it like that, but on this like really fundamental perspective, like
We
this
are light
planet wouldn't
beings.
wouldn't exist. Yeah, and this planet wouldn't exist without the sun.
Yeah.
Like literally we need it for life on this planet. It's at least how we know it currently.
Yeah. And
Um,
and so like we can say beyond that we're souls, or there's a higher dimensional reality that we exist in, but
yeah.
sort of in the maybe like the bridging into physical material, we come from the sun.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. And we are light beings
Yeah.
too. I appreciate how you said that. Yeah. That's it. That's a piece of it. Wow, that's really kind of changes the way it like make it takes it from feeling so technical as like how I was
Yeah.
describing it to this like, oh wow, this organic
Yeah.
uh
Like
process.
light. Like we talk so much about
Yeah.
light, but it really has this technical
Yeah.
physics based component.
Totally. This power, this force in a way. Yeah.
Okay. Then so then there's this imprint, and people who have their astrology charts read will understand that composition, but this is overlaid based in the gates, and so um which are these sort of 64 hexagrams. And so anywhere you'd like to pick up on still like sort of what the gates are, how they were, if sort of Ra just sort of channeled their order around the zodiac wheel, and then how it leads to the composition of our human design chart.
Yeah, yeah. So Um, like I said, the gates correlate to the 64 hexagrams in the I Ching, which is the book of changes. So the word I like to use for this is like they represent 64 different archetypes. So
Mm.
if you look at the gates, it's kind of they're when you read the original descriptions of the hexagram, it tells a story. And there are different kinds of stories. Stories of potentially going to war, stories of getting married, these old 3,000-year-old Chinese adages. It's like they had this the symbolism within the story of a process. So each hexagram has its own story, and each line of the hexagram, like I said, a hexagram is 6 different lines. Each line is like a different tone of the
Like
story.
a
I like
different
how Richard,
harmonic.
yes, yeah, and I like how Richard Rudd says it. It's like playing the same song in a different key. If you're familiar with music theory, playing it in C versus F, it's the same song, but the way that it sounds is different. And when you go into the details of the lines, each line represents something very unique too, which I love talking about the lines. I wrote a whole Medium uh, series, I guess, on the lines, and so for example, I'll just give you a brief, like line 1 being the creator. Line 6 is like on the roof, able to see the higher perspective. They're kind of disconnected, but they're still a part of the entire process. And line 3 is the trial and error. It's the martyr energy. It's the one that's like learning through experience. So each of the lines have a different tone that express the archetype of the hexagram or the gate or the gene key in a very unique way.
Yeah, so these lines, these tones, these different harmonic resonances, and I often find so much relates back to music and sound and vibration.
Yeah,
So
totally.
so these lines, these different vibrations, they sort of apply to each. And I love the word archetype, because it almost feels like
Yeah.
you could say these are like the foundational stories of humanity, like the foundational
Yeah.
archetypes. I think about Jung, and sort of like um so there are these like foundational stories and archetypes, and we're all sort
Yeah.
of made up of different aspects of the stories. And then there are these 6 lines that have different sort of vibrational essences, tones that apply to each one.
Uh-huh. Yes. Yeah. And yeah. And so remind me of what the follow-up question was.
So then, so how do so the so then how does that shape our human design chart?
Yeah.
And I'll just say, like, so our chart then is made up of, based on our, where we're born, when we're born. Um, we have a unique composition of these gates, and a unique composition of the different lines or tones that apply to each gate. And, as we've talked before, and we'll get into, 2 of those lines make up a profile of that each of us has. So we
Mm-hmm.
resonate with 2 of the lines more strongly.
Yeah.
But yeah, anywhere you'd like to continue just into painting the portrait of the human design chart.
So when you go to pull up your chart, which is what in the human design is called your body graph,
Mm-hmm.
you'll see there is going to be, when you look to the left, there's going to be a panel of numbers, which are the gates. And then when you look to the right, there's going to be a panel of numbers. The right side, when you're looking directly at the chart, is known as your mind/personality. So that's exactly when you come out of your mother's womb. You'll see a bunch of glyphs, which are planets. When you come out of your mother's womb, which gate each of those planets are in. So for example, the very top one's going to be your sun, where the sun was right when you
So
were
there's
born.
a lot of overlap in astrology that people could resonate with, like based on, the familiar planets. You would
Yeah,
see,
tropical astrology, yeah.
yeah, there's going to be a gate assigned to that, or
Mm-hmm.
an archetype,
Yes.
you could say.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the gate will be assigned to it, and yeah, each gate represents a unique archetype. And each of the, for example, lines of each gate also correlate to the different degrees in astrology. So I have my sun 19 degrees Cancer. If you have your sun 19 degrees Cancer, you're going to have the 53.6 because the sixth line was activated during that certain degree. So this panel, the right panel when you're looking at it, is the planetary placements when you're born, and then you go to the left side, which is known as your design placements. So this essentially is 88 degrees before you were born. And it's interesting because it's like the idea of the design, it has to do with the body, it has to do with the aspects of ourselves that are more unconscious. Perhaps other people can notice them of us, but they're more unconscious. And so this has to do with more with the form. And it's also planetary placement, same planets on either side, but it's like where these planets were 88 degrees before you were born.
Yeah, so almost like conscious mind, unconscious body.
Yes. Hmm. Yeah, slash design. That's the technical term, design.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
And so yeah, this is like the mind personality side and the design body side. And so each of these planetary or each of the gates in human design, like I said, they all correlate to a certain gate in your actual body graph. And so depending on if you have a planetary activation, you'll have the activation on your body graph. And so the activation on the body graph will determine what centers you have defined, what centers you have open. And so, I mean, looking at a chart, you'd be able to see exactly like, oh, okay, 2 gates that are from different centers will create a channel and that will activate the centers. And
Okay,
it's
so
like,
let's
we'll
ease
have to
into
look
the
at,
let's ease into
yeah,
this, because we're introducing some new language. So
yeah,
so
totally.
we have the gates. We're not
We
going to
have the
go through all the
gates.
archetypes, whatever. You can look that up
Hmm.
online. You can look up your chart, your body graph. But suffice it to say, these gates make up our unique sort of constellation composition, the
Hmm.
right side, the left side. And that relates to our energy centers, right? Maybe that would be a good
Yes.
place to go next. So maybe you can speak to the energy centers, which some may know as chakras, right?
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. So as I mentioned previously, traditionally we've known of the 7 chakras, which is in certain frameworks, of course, it's still a thing. I still feel it's a thing. And in the human design framework, there are 9 energy centers that we have. And so each energy center represents something, its own unique thing. And I think it'd be a lot to go through each one. Maybe we
Yeah.
can do another
Yeah.
podcast or
Yeah.
something with
No, no,
it. But
this should be a whole series, really, because
I
this
know,
should be
I
a
think
whole
so
teaching
too.
series.
I think so too. But essentially, the ones that you have defined determine where there's consistent, um, I don't want to use the word energy because there are particular energy centers, but where there's a
Right.
consistent uh, energetic signature is what's coming to mind.
Okay.
There's an energetic signature, the energetic signature, and the purpose of that center is continually operating. Versus if you have an open center, um, that is where you can receive conditioning from people, but that's also where you can kind of learn from. So, for example, if you have an open emotional center, I think you and I both have ours defined. Are you
Yeah.
emotionally
I'm like
defined?
completely defined except for my heart space.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. So it's, for example, we run consistent emotional energy. Even when we're alone in our own auras, we're depending on the gates and the way that the design is, we're running emotions that emotional texture tones running consistently. Someone who's emotionally open, this isn't to say that they're not emotional. I think that's an important piece. Just because you don't have it defined doesn't mean you don't experience emotions, but it's according to this framework, the complexity and the nuance and like the tone of it wouldn't be as present for someone who's emotionally open, unless, of course, another layer is the transit. Unless there's a transit, there's a planetary activation happening. Say someone has one gate, right? So it's like open emotional center, one gate. There's a planetary activation happening where the other gate's activated, creates a channel. This person could be sitting alone in their office and start feeling the nuances of emotion. So each of the centers determine and make up a part of our blueprint and where we run energy and where we don't.
Okay, so let me
Or
try to break this down a little bit. So
yeah.
so the energies.
So I want to correct myself really quick. Where we run expression and where we don't, because I'm conscious of using the word energy. But anyways, yes.
Yeah, the language is so particular.
I know,
So
yeah.
these energy centers, which some may know as chakras, they exist at different points along the throughout the body, and I'm not sure how it's referred to in human design. Someone referred to the chakras as sort of the condensed energy points throughout the energetic body, and that relate to different functions, both physically,
Yeah.
different aspects of mind, of body. Some might call it sort of, you might relate it to
Character,
yeah, some
like,
might relate it to harmonics as well, stemming from the more physical, lower primal density of the root, rising all the way
mm-hmm.
up to the more sort of physical, metaphysical, spiritual aspects of the crown, like sort of
Yeah,
that.
the
It's a little
inspiration. Mm-hmm.
different in human design because they just have different. They're assigned different qualities, right, and sort of
Yeah.
placed a little differently. But basically, that's the essence of these different energy centers. And you started to speak to the one really important aspect in human design, which is they can be defined or they can be open. And maybe you can just uh, explain a little bit about what it actually means to be defined and open. But basically, what you're saying is when it's like for me, for example, all of my centers are defined except for one, and that means like it's you might say it's a little confusing because I'm also very empathic, but in human design, a lot of what I'm feeling is mine, you might say. Like it's not as permeable to outside influence. Is that kind of how you would say it?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. It's more of an outward projecting energy, not intentionally projecting, but just by nature of
Yeah,
one's
it's like
makeup.
it's coming from within, would you say?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And then if
Yeah.
it's open, you're a bit more permeable, maybe even
Perceptive.
vulnerable to
Yes.
outside influence.
Uh-huh. Yes. And conditioning.
And yeah,
Um,
conditioning,
and
right?
conditioning, keyword, yeah. Although this is where like a nuance comes in. It's separate but related. For example, reflectors, they have all of their centers open. Um, but one interesting thing about reflectors is that because they're so just kind of naturally connected to the transits in a way, it's raw. I remember him calling them aliens. They're kind of like aliens where they, and you know, what they do is they sample energy. So although they can, I wouldn't even say absorb, they can reflect a lot of the energy that they receive, they're also not as vulnerable to as the other types. Like, so for example, you know,
Mm.
like I said, they have all their centers open because they're a unique type. They're not as vulnerable. Whereas myself, open-head and ajna, I can maybe be more vulnerable to other people's thoughts and opinions. But when I remember, oh no, mine's open, I'm here to actually see things from different perspectives and not necessarily ascribe to one truth, then it's like that awareness helps me to kind of. It's interesting. I'm picturing this like kung fu, like qigong, kung fu, tai chi, these
You're like being
opinions of
like
other
water.
people.
You're like being
Yeah.
like water. You're flexible. You're working with the energies. Um, Maybe not meant to take it as personally, not meant to let it
Yeah,
shape how you identify yourself.
totally.
And you're bringing in, maybe we'll go into the types next. You're bringing in one of the types. There's a few
Yeah.
types. One of them being reflectors, which is a very unique, like very, a low
Yeah,
percent,
it's
like it's
rare.
rare. It's like a rare Pokemon
Yeah.
in the wild.
Uh-huh,
Like,
totally.
and they're almost like what I interpret you mean by connected to the transits is like they're so tuned into collective energies
Yeah.
because they're just so open. It's like they're so permeable. They're like flowing like water, just sort of moving with, absorbing the energies of any space they're in.
Yeah. And I think they're perhaps permeable, but they're not as vulnerable
Right, yeah, key
as all the other
distinction. It
types.
doesn't mean they're
Yeah.
like fragile to
Hmm.
it's not the same as
Like they're
being
not susceptible, like
right.
as susceptible.
Right, like not
Yeah,
the same as being an empath where like you could like absorb and take on a
exactly.
different quality. Almost could be like an X-Men quality where like you're just I don't even know what that superpower would be, but you can you can work with you just can tune
Yeah.
into and work with all the energies around you.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's a good symbolism for it.
Okay, so we have these energy centers, and either, in the reflector case, which is rare, all of them are open, or in
Hmm.
my case, which might also be quite rare, all of them are defined except for one. For most people, you probably have a mixture, right? Of some
Yes.
open, some
Hmm.
defined, and maybe you just want to speak to how that mixture of open or defined leads
Like
to
happens.
like, or yeah, happens, or and leads to your unique like what it means, I guess, for how you navigate the world.
Yeah. Well, so what determines whether a center is defined are the channels that connect the different centers. So what does that mean? So for example, like I said, there are the gates of the hexagrams,
Mm-hmm.
the actual gates in human design correlate to different centers in the body.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have a planetary placement at one, you'll have, so I think you have the sun at 55, right? Or 59.
Oh, me?
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
What's your,
I'm 59, 55.
yeah,
So
15.
yeah,
Okay.
59 son. Yep.
59. So for example, it's like when you were born, the sun was in the 59. So you have that gate there, right? And then say you also had the line 6. This is the other side of the, because I'm saying this because I know this, the other side of the 59 is the line 6. So say
Yeah.
you also had a planet in that line 6, that would create a channel. And so because you have a channel here, both of these centers are defined because there's energy flowing and running, channeling from one center to the other.
Ah, okay.
So
And so we probably won't even be able to explain all of what that means, but what we could say is like the channels are what connect the energy centers.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
So some
Yeah, having a channel will by default mean that there's centers defined on
yeah.
each of the side of the
Okay. So
channels. Yeah.
that's that's what defines your energy centers, and B, it's defined because it connects the energy centers to one another, so the energy flows between them.
Yes. Uh-huh. And then you remember each gate is an archetype. So the 59 dispersion, the 6 conflict. So it's like there's this archetype of expression. Let's say that the
Mm.
archetype of someone's potential character. that is depicted in this channel. And then so it's like your emotional energy also will be contingent upon the archetype of the 6. Your sacral energy will be contingent, well, not contingent upon, but it's like the 59 will be an outlet for your sacral energy. Your sacral yes is your sacral no, since the 59 is connected to the sacral center.
Yeah. So like for me, this will also be introducing new material for people who are just following along thus far. But I'm a very emotional. I mean, I'm an emotional person in general, but in human design, I'm extra emotional
Are you?
because
I have to see your chart.
I have a double emotional wave. So I
Ah.
have this, like, I think, yeah, the
Do you have the
59.
59-6? Uh-huh.
Yeah, and
Okay.
then I have another one. So that one connects the sacral to the solar plexus?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yes.
so I have another one that connects the solar plexus to the throat.
Okay, so either the 12-22 or the 35-36.
Yeah,
Do you recall? Does it look like it's on the outside or like kind of on the inside?
I feel like it's the 1222. I'm not sure
Okay.
exactly, but
Okay,
and
cool.
so
Your mom has that one too, which is interesting.
yeah. Yeah. So I have so maybe this is where we should go to next, which is just um this is an aspect of authority, is that right? Like if you're an emotional authority or
So the channel's not necessarily an aspect of the authority. The authority is contingent upon a center in the body being defined or not defined. For example, reflectors, they don't have any definition. But the yeah, the authority generally, depending on what your type is, depending on what definition you have a very particular authority. In your case, the emotional solar plexus is the one that takes the precedence over the sacral or the spleen. So it seems like you do have all those defined. So you do
yeah.
have the intuitive intelligence of the spleen that can come and go. You have the sacral, but the emotional authority will always take precedence. You'll always have to feel it out. You'll always have to wait out your wave, so to speak,
Yeah.
before making any decisions.
Yeah. Well, so this is okay, so this is a good throughway because we were talking about how energy centers can be opened or defined. And so one consequence of that is it can lead to the kind of authority you have, right? So maybe even before we go into the different types, which are very important
Yeah.
as well, we just speak to, so what is authority in human design? What does
Yeah,
that
yeah.
mean?
So there's inner authority and there's outer authority. The authority that you're referring to is inner authority. And inner authority, as I mentioned earlier briefly, is what supports us in our, according to this framework, correct decision-making process. So it's
Mm-hmm.
not the mind. I think our
Right. This
society,
is
we've
like
kind of
such a
been
crucial,
conditioned.
yeah,
Totally.
I feel like we're circling back to such a crucial part of human design
Yes.
is how we make decisions.
Yeah. Yes, definitely timestamp this a little bit. If anyone
Yeah.
listens to any part of this entire podcast,
Yeah.
listen to this bit. No, no, really. Because in our society, it's like power through. We think we need to do something. We think, oh, this has to be how it is. So I need to do X, Y, and Z, even if our body, our being is like screaming no. And you see this when people burn out. They have intense health problems, you experience depression, and like there's so many facets of how not listening to yourself and your inner authority can manifest. But I'm saying all this to say the inner authority is the inner decision making process that supports us based off of our type and our design, supports us in knowing what is correct for us and how we make decisions. And like I said, the mind's great. Mind's outer authority. I feel like right now what we're doing is like outer authority. You're asking me questions and I'm sharing information and there's a feedback loop and you're sharing information, right? So the outer authority is a part of the process of how we engage and interact in this reality, of course. But when it comes to these significant life decisions, when it comes to feeling into whether a relationship's right for us, a job's right for us, an opportunity's right for us, like as many of us are doing now, deconditioning the mind from thinking that it knows what to do and tuning back into what's actually happening in our inner authority. So for ourselves, like our emotional center, right? Making sure that we're at a emotionally homeostatic place. It's not super excited up here and not like super low and down here. It is coming from this place of the the term that's used is clarity, right? And your decisions coming from this place of clarity. And for us being sacral beings, so all manifesting generators, all generators are sacral beings, meaning we're also sacrally defined.
And when you say us, you're
Um,
referring to you and I.
yes, yeah. And so it's like once we're emotionally clear, we can feel into our gut. Like, oh yeah, this feels aligned. Oh yeah, cool. I want to do this. Okay, cool. I want to meet with that person. Okay, I want to try this opportunity, or I want to have this experience. Versus which I feel like so many people struggle with. And I mean, no one's perfect. I'm also, it's called the human design experiment. So I'm also still engaging in this experiment as I try to just discern what's in alignment for me as an individual being. But I'm saying all that to say there are times where I don't get it right either. My mind's like, oh, do this thing, or oh, like, but I'm learning to catch myself and ask, okay, is this mind? Is this coming from this almost like anxious place, or am I like leaning back and chilling out and seeing what reality is giving me to respond to?
Yeah, this is really beautiful. I want to sort of double click on something because I hadn't heard someone frame it like that, but it seems like a really beautiful description of how we're talking about decision making. Is you mentioned mind being more outer, and I'm not sure if you would say body, but that
Yeah.
aspect of body being more inner. And what it
Uh-huh.
made me think of was like mind in some way. I mean, body is connected to everything as well, but mind we could think of as like really tapped in to a collective mind. Ideas are
Yeah.
floating in and out all the time. We're channeling, even if you're not
Yeah.
doing the kind of channeling I talk about, you're channeling something.
Yeah.
There's some voice
Totally.
going through. You don't know if
It's
it's
coming from
yours. You're
somewhere.
getting
Yeah.
it's like a quantum field of ideas you're getting all the
Yeah.
time. So when we're doing this, our minds are linked and we're just channeling the stream of information. But that's not necessarily the place you want to rely on to make the very personal decisions that are
Yeah.
going to relate to that personal body, that vessel, that
Mhm.
container. And you might say that that's where human design points us to the inner authority of our body,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah. I think that's a very beautifully articulated reflection of that.
Cool.
And then their inner authority, yeah, will be contingent upon what our unique inner authority is based off of our design.
And so what you were alluding to is that there's a few different kinds of authority you can have. Um, so so for us, that includes uh, making decisions based on that sacral response, right? Like the sacral energy center, which you've talked about it as like the like
Yeah.
a very black or white yes or no, right? Like if you asked,
Uh-huh.
like the body would just it would have
Yeah.
this primal response, like, do you want
Totally.
chocolate or do you want broccoli? You're like,
Exactly.
oh,
Do you want
chocolate.
pizza?
Yeah,
Yeah.
like you'll
Yeah.
just know. And so that will be one kind of authority, an emotional authority, right? So that'll be an emotional authority that people
Well,
go ahead.
the yes or no is more sacral authority. So that's the gut.
And so I was getting that confused. That's not necessarily an
Solar
emotional authority.
plexus. Yeah. So the emotional solar plexus is its own center.
Right.
And
I
so, but
have
you can
that
have
too,
both
but yeah.
definition. Yeah. Uh-huh. So you have the emotional solar plexus and the sacral. And any sacral definition, like if you have sacrally defined, you're either a generator or a manifesting generator. And then emotional authority will make it an emotional mani-gen or an emotional generator. And so it just really depends. And then if you have neither of those, you have, and it's just the spleen defined, you're splenic. So that means you're more like in the moment. And I think maybe thinking in another one, if we wanted to, I can go through each of them.
Yeah, we
Because
can we
there's
can get
there's more of
creative.
like an
I mean, by
elaborate.
the time we're done, we're gonna have 50 episodes recorded.
I know
It's
that's what
gonna
it
be a
feels like.
whole. It's gonna be the best teaching that ever. It's gonna be best teaching since Ra. Um, but so yeah, so just maybe we'll go through this, and then maybe we'll do one more, maybe like the types or something, and we can wrap up this one. But um, so for authority, so you can be sacral, you can like just be sacral, right? And that's that like yes or no, like, primal body response. You can be emotional, which is solar plexus, and then you have to sort of ride the wave of your emotions through getting
Yes.
excited, getting depressed, getting clear, which
Uh-huh.
is me in addition to the sacral. Um
Yeah. And the one important thing about the solar plexus is that like there's no truth in the now.
Right.
So
You can't, you're not
yeah.
supposed to make decisions right away, right?
Yeah, and it's like the highs or the lows, it's just kind of it's a time to just feel out what's there for you to some might say it's not gathering information, but I feel like it's nuance of like it's not the same kind of information. It's a different texture of information on an emotional level. So you're just kind of feeling it out and gauging and you're just feeling it, and then
Yeah.
clarity will allow you to know like yes or no.
And, we won't necessarily go all the way into this part of it, but just to emphasize the fact that I really need to wait is that I have the channel between connecting my sacral and my solar plexus. Um, and the solar plexus is defined, and then also connecting the solar plexus to my throat. So
Yeah.
chakra. So
And that
those are like two separate emotional waves I'm riding, which have like,
mm-hmm.
I think they mean different things. Like one is tribal, one is right.
Yeah, one's well, it depends. One's individual, either individual or collective, but I think if you have the 1222, that's more individual. So yeah, they have like different nuances of expression along with
Yeah.
the definition of what the gates make it.
Yeah. So they can be like, I don't know if you would call them different emotional waves or
Uh-huh.
have different reference points to the emotionality you're working with.
Yeah. Totally, because one goes to the throat too, right? So one is what makes you a manifesting generator.
Mm,
The other one is more sacral emotional. And this is the 59.6 is a channel of intimacy. It's
right.
also the channel of creativity too. So it's like you kind of hold the energetic discerning container of like who to create creative projects with, who to collaborate with, right? Of course, there's like the intimacy sexuality piece of it as well,
Yeah.
but the sexuality creativity can ripple effect in different ways, and that's the tribal energy, right? So it's kind of like, oh, who can I bring into this tribe-like energy container to create something with?
Yeah. And just to call people's attention to it, like you're referencing what is my human design has no name for it, but like my primary archetype, would you
Well, the
say?
59
The
is, yes, but
59
the
is.
6, I'd have to see where the 6 is in your chart.
Well, I am a
Because
6
the
too.
well, the 6, that's the line
Oh yeah.
after the gate, but the
Oh,
6
oh yeah.
gate.
6, you're not referring to line. There's another.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, but
Yeah, so
so
the 59.6 makes the channel of intimacy. So you have this one, yeah.
yeah,
And
so
then you have this one too, but I have to see where it is.
yeah, and maybe we'll do that next time, but you're just referencing what is sort of one of my primary archetypes, which is like
Yeah.
cultivating intimacy is sort of how it's called. So yes, that can have
Mm-hmm.
romantic implications, but also collaboration, connecting with people
Mm-hmm.
is like one of my primary missions, right? You might
Yeah,
say.
yeah. Totally. It's kind of what, our design or what we're natural at, it's kind of what fuels us too. It's like we can try to get away from it, but it's almost like we can't not. It's like the way we operate. So,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Okay, so we'll just pin that for another. but
I know
but
we could go way deep into that too.
but so the one other thing you can be in terms of authority is you can be splenic, right? Where
Uh-huh.
you would just, and is that considered, is that related to how human design defines intuition or?
Yeah, it's like instinctual intuition. It is the intuitive sense, which is interesting because when we hear the term intuitive healers, I think we're thinking telepathy, but
Right, like I have,
or
this is what I
psychic.
struggled with
Yeah.
last time, is I was like, wait, I'm intuitive, and like
Uh-huh.
I have all these uh,
Yeah,
ego triggers. Like, wait a second, I'm that too. But human
totally.
design has a particular definition for it.
Yeah, it's like the intuition's in the body. The intuition's an inner authority. When
Yeah,
you are walking, I don't know, 3,000 years ago in the jungle and you sense a tiger behind you, it's not could be your mind, but it's like, oh, there's a
it's
tiger.
very
But usually it's
primal,
like,
very instinctual.
exactly. Yeah, it's kind of like, oh, I could feel something. And you might not consciously realize it's the body, but it is the body like alerting you. And so the spleen has to do with the instincts, um, the intuition as
Like
well on this
survival
really
based
primal level.
intuition almost.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so that can be one, that's another form of authority.
Authority. Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. So then maybe just to wrap up this already incredibly deep, multi-layered conversation and just setting the stage
To
for
be
many
continued.
more, which is just so great.
Yeah.
I feel it's just such an exciting adventure we're on. Um,
Yeah.
Maybe we could just talk about another. So I've said this about everything, but everything, it does feel so important and foundational in human design, which is the types.
So it depends on how you look at it. Some might say there are 5 types, some might say there are 4 types, and then a subtype. I could care less either way. I'm like, okay, it is it is what it is. So we have the reflectors, like I mentioned. They have no center definition, but they can have gates, right? Like you can still have gates, but if the gate doesn't connect, doesn't make a channel, so it doesn't make a center. And so, like I said, they're kind of like the aliens. That's what Ra calls them. And I have a couple reflector friends, and I'm like, oh, I can see that. It's really
Yeah, it seems
interesting
like
to
it would, for the
interact.
reflector, it would be so interesting to start to like how you would identify yourself with these gates, this information, because they're not so like does it, how would you even talk about it? It doesn't apply so personally to them, or these are just the energies that are flowing through them, or
Yeah, I think it's like maybe the energies that kind of make up some of their composition. But it's more so it's like this layer of a part of their identity in this matrix reality, and yet there's a part of them that's deeply just naturally connected to.
I almost understand a little bit what Ra means, because by the alien description, it's like they're not they're not as quote unquote human in the sense that they don't have as defined like a human sort of archetypal composition in the way that everyone else does with the defined centers.
Yes.
They're almost like I don't even know
Yeah.
what you would say,
I
like
like neutral in a
yeah,
way.
like more neutral, like they're in a
Yeah.
body, they've incarnated in a body, but they're still like one step beyond the
Yes.
personality construction, kind of. I don't know.
Yeah. No, that's a good way to say that. So yeah, so we have the reflectors, and then we have the projectors, which projectors are here to be invited. Um, and there are different authority. You can have emotional authority projector. You can have a splenic projector. Remember, you can't have a sacral because sacrally defined means your generator or manifesting generator. But
Okay.
projectors are here to be asked to be invited, and Ross refers to these beings as the ones who are going to be guiding humanity as we move into these next levels of evolution collectively. Where before the other type that I'm getting to now, the manifestors, were more of the authoritative authoritarians here to initiate things, to create plans. Hey, you guys, let's do this, let's do that. Hitler was a manifestor. So where more of that energy took precedence. I know it's a random, but it's like this is just that's the reference that
Manifestor's still
I
good. It's
use
still
so people can
good.
understand. No,
That's
yeah, no,
just how
totally.
Hitler used
Manifestors are
it.
amazing.
Yeah.
Yes. No, thank you for clarifying. Yeah, manifestors are I love it. I've so many amazing people in my life are
My mother's a
manifestors, but
manifestor.
yes, yeah, she is a manifestor. I love her. I love your mom.
So my mother and
But it's
Hitler are examples.
just a couple out of the wide range of
Yeah.
amazing manifestors on this planet. But I like it's going from the authoritarian, like almost that's an extreme like dictatorship energy, not to say all manifestors are, but going from, hey you guys, I'm getting this urge, this is what we're doing, to which is the manifestors, going to the projectors, who they have to ask to be invited. And it's like they have this ability to see it's the energy sometimes, like when a projector is looking at me, it feels piercing.
Mm,
It's because it's almost like they're seeing through me into my soul, or they're
mm.
seeing through into something deeper that they're able to recognize. This is why they have to be invited, because not everyone's ready to hear that
Not everyone
ish.
wants to receive the intensity of that vision. But so what you mean about being invited is like being invited to share, right? To speak
Share,
their truth, to
exactly.
speak what they
Yeah,
know.
yeah, exactly.
Whereas a manifester is actually meant to share
Yep.
their ideas, right?
They walk into a room and it's like, dit, dit, dit. I have my grandmother, ego manifester. My uncle's also ego manifester. One of my previous partners was an ego or a splenic manifester. It's like they don't ask for permission. This is
Yeah.
one thing about
Well,
manifestors. They just
and
don't.
so just to clarify, when you say ego manifester, you don't mean in like the colloquial like, oh, they're egotistical. That's like a different
No,
place
yeah.
that they're making decisions from?
Yes, it's a kind of inner authority.
Okay.
So the ego heart center
Got
is
it.
also can be a authority
Got
if
it.
there are no other definition. Yeah. So So like I said, we have the projectors, the manifestors, and then we have the generators and the manifesting generators. And what's interesting is, like I said, people can say there are 4 types and a subtype, or 5 types, and generally manifesting generators are considered a subtype because they're a combination of, they have manifesting energy based off of the channel definition. Like I said, your 1222, if that's what you have defined, makes you a manifesting
Yeah.
generator. But it's like you can't necessarily, or not that you can't, but maybe it won't be correct for you to walk into a room and be like, we're doing dit, dit, dit. The generators and manifesting generators still have to respond to life.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
So
And this is something I've been learning is like I'm not supposed to
I know.
just charge in and speak my truth,
I
which
know
I
we
have a
want
tendency
to
to do.
though.
But so yeah, maybe we can say a little bit about, well, you can say a little bit about the generator and then how the manifesting generator is supposed to work with that manifesting element.
Yeah. So, like I said, generators are here to respond to life. Their sacral responds to life. Their gut responds to life. And this will help determine essentially what the generators have energy for.
Because generators are really, like, the name really applies to them being
Yeah,
like the workforce
exactly.
of
Of our
of
planet.
of our planet, right? Like they're the ones
Yeah.
that have the most consistent energy, but it has to align with their gut
Yeah, with
response.
what's correct.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's like your mind's like, yeah, sure, and you don't have the energy for it, and you go into this project, you go into this thing, and you're like, oh, I actually don't have the energy to like complete this or finish this, or this feels really like frustrating because
Yeah.
the energy is not correct for it to be there, you know?
And
So,
almost like I feel like I want to use to stick with the metaphor of the workforce, you could maybe find yourself being used by a system
oh yeah, that's a
that doesn't actually
of our
align
planet.
for you because you can contribute energetically, but it's not meant for you.
Totally. And I think you touch really well on like the collective conditioning and some of the systems that are overarching right now that so many of us, I mean, I've worked for the state for almost 10 years, you know, it's like to a certain level, we've had to be a part of that because of that's what you had here for you. And I mean, so many of us are kind of breaking out of that now in different ways, but yes, so they're the workhorses. And so this is why follow for the generators following that and manifesting generators following that gut and of course if you have emotional authority waiting for the emotional wave, this will tell you what the correct thing is for you to put your generative energy into. And so the difference between gens, manifesting generators, and generators are here to respond to life. So it's like literally just, and I know it's such an interesting concept because it's not what we're taught at all. It's like go after it, do the thing. But
Yeah,
it's like
like
if you
we're
chill
taught to
out.
like, okay, you know, think about who you want to be or what you want to do. Like cult even in spiritual circles, like the idea of manifestation outside of human design, the more colloquial
hmm
general idea of manifestation is like, okay, manifest what you want. But human design is presenting this consideration that like sort of pausing and waiting and listening for some invitation, which gets a little nuanced because it doesn't always mean external. It doesn't mean you're getting a letter in the mail
Yeah.
necessarily.
Yes, yes,
It could be an
exactly.
inner invitation, kind of.
Well, so I wouldn't use the word invitation I would use for projectors,
Okay.
but it is nuanced. So for example, like from a projector perspective, someone looking at you, smiling at you and being friendly, that can seem like an invitation.
Yeah.
You know, and so it's a nuance. So for example, as a generator looking at a billboard and seeing something mentioned and feeling this like, oh, like this is me responding to something, whatever that is, looking at a job posting, seeing a reel.
Yeah. So like signs are synchronicities, but then it sounds like what you're also saying is feeling the response of your body, right? Like
Yeah.
feeling that bodily like it's not your mind saying just saying, oh, I like that. It's your
Uh-huh.
body like almost like lurching forward like, yes,
Yeah.
chocolate.
It's just, yeah, it's this deeper, subtle, sometimes more nuanced. It can be obvious sometimes, but I think when we start paying attention initially, it's more nuanced to like, oh, I actually don't want to go, like, I actually don't want to go towards that thing, or oh, yeah, I do. There's something drawing me there. And so, and in response to
Yes.
life. And
Yes.
it could be something obvious, like someone calling you and being like, hey, there's this opportunity, is that something you're interested in? And so this is also why generators across the board, gens and generators, they do good with yes or no questions because it's like, yeah, do you want pizza? Do you want sushi? You know, on this simple
I
level.
would just say as an aside, I am so much like that because when people just ask me, I talk about this all the time. When people just ask me how I'm doing, I'm like, I don't know how to answer. So
I
much
know.
of the time I say riding the wave.
Yeah.
I said it to you. I say riding the
Mm-hmm.
wave because I almost get paralyzed. I like freeze up. I'm like, I
I
don't know.
know,
There's so
yeah.
many things. Like, do you mean yesterday? Do you mean
Totally.
2 weeks ago? And like,
I
so
know.
I really do resonate more with that. Yes or no?
Yeah, I know. It's funny because when you asked me that too, I was like, oh, I had to pause. I'm like, how am I doing? And
Yeah.
then I'm like, oh, what do I feel like? What's happening? And then the story arises.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, oh, okay, the story of whatever just naturally comes. No, is it a yes or no? Like, do you want to do this?
Yeah.
Do you want to do that? And I think it's even myself, it's taken some awareness to communicate with people like that. Because for me, like when I read that, it almost felt like, how do I describe this? It was almost like, why did I ask? It's just I think a part of me perceived, I don't know why, I'm not sure exactly why, that kind of communication in a needy way, or more so like maybe the layer is, oh, it's having me actually go inside and ask myself whether or not I want to do it versus the normal, okay, let's do this. Okay, let's do this. Let's like being with the flow and going with everything versus, oh, do I actually want to do
Pausing
this?
to
Like they're
check in
asking
with
me,
self.
yes. Yes, exactly. And that's what that question, that yes or no question allows for.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's
Yeah.
it's so important, probably for a few of the different types, but especially for generators who can have this kind of boundless energy that,
Yeah.
if we want to be really intentional about what is, quote unquote, sort of correct for us to apply it to, we really need to, rather than just going with, if there's a smorgasbord of food and things that all look tasty and good, right? And the mind can be like,
Yeah.
oh, I'll just take everything, put it all on my plate. Well, the body's like, hold
Yeah.
on, we're not going to have that kind of cake.
Yeah.
So it's really about checking in, getting clear, getting intentional.
Yeah, exactly. And so that being a key aspect for all generators, manifesting generators. So the thing that differentiates the generator from the manifesting generator, like I said, it's from a chart perspective, it's whether or not there's a channel going from the place um, of authority or any of the other, it doesn't have to be authority, it can be like sacral, but it's whether there's a channel going to the throat,
Oh, okay.
because the throat is where the manifesting energy comes from.
And that
Yes.
what that sparks in me is that, like, so in more yogic traditions or sort of general understandings of the chakras, like the throat is like, the creative energy that gets expressed. Like there is a linkage actually to
Totally.
the sacral,
To the sacrum. Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So that so
Mm-hmm.
so the sacral is one sort of like, this is like more general sort of Vedic
Yeah.
awareness, but the
Uh-huh.
sacral is like more of the primal creation, like literally like
Mm-hmm.
birth, sex, right?
Yeah,
Um,
creative
but
portals.
then there's a connection to what might be considered more mind-based creation in the throat, which is like, think
Yeah.
about language. Language is story,
Mm-hmm.
expressing your truth, creating in that way. Um,
Yeah, exactly.
and so it's just interesting that that is the key to the
Uh-huh.
manifesting component because we manifest so much with
Yeah,
our voice.
totally. Yeah. And even from like a musculoskeletal perspective, the sacrum is connected to the jaw throat area.
Mm.
And when you look at like a picture of like the larynx and you look at the picture of like the vulva and the uterus, they're different sizes and ratios, but similar shapes. So yeah, there's this actual physiological connection too.
Maybe also there's a yin yang component, like a masculine, like sacral being feminine,
Ah,
throat being the masculine
yeah. I could see that,
aspect of
like
creation.
doing energy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the throat piece is what gives the manifesting energy. So, it's obviously the throat would be defined because there's a channel connecting to it. So
Mm-hmm.
the nuance here is that manifesting generators still have to wait to respond, but after following your authority, for example, for us, I'm also a manifesting generator, emotional authority. Once I wait for clarity and I come to this place of homeostasis and I speak, for me, I have the 3536 defined.
Okay.
So it's like this, it's collective circuitry where yours is more individual. But what I'm saying is once I feel it out and I speak the feeling, for example, whatever it is, that's when the manifesting can happen, but only in response to something.
Mm.
Like, there has to be some impetus for
We're
me.
we're
And then
not
I feel out the wave and then
yeah.
I respond, and that's what allows the manifesting energy.
Like if we're working on a group project, like we're not the ones who are walking right into the room, first team meeting, with the idea and being like, okay, everyone, this is what we're gonna do. We're the ones who might get inspired, but then we need to go maybe spend some time alone, go through a couple meetings, ride the wave.
Yeah,
But then when we get clear, our idea is very important to be shared. Would you say it that way?
totally. Yeah, and even our energy to get the project done.
Mm.
Like, for example, yours would be the creative container that you create, bringing the right people together for the project.
Yes.
Mine, I have like something that represents beginning and ending. So it's like I would be beneficial for like project management to help the beginnings and help with the ending. So it's nuance based off of the nuances of the chart.
Of course.
But
Like
yeah,
what archetypes you're working with.
yeah,
Like, yeah, I'm gonna be
totally.
like navigating the intimacy and feeling, like that into that.
Yeah.
But in general for the generator and manifesting generator, we're gonna have that workforce energy. So we're gonna need to be
Yeah.
intentional about it. And for the
Mm.
Manny gens like us, we're gonna have that inspiration and creativity. We're just gonna have to wait to write it out
Yeah,
to share it.
because we're emotionally defined, yeah. So
Yeah.
if we were just sacrally defined, we could be more in the now. One of my good friends, she has the 3420, and it's a sort of sacral connected to the throat. And I remember I was telling us, or she was telling me a story about how she ended up with this guitar, and she just went in the place. She's like, "Oh my God, I want this guitar." And the guy was like, "Well, oh yeah, I've been looking to either sell it or give it away so you can have it." And I was like, that was a perfect example of literally like manifesting generator energy. Her gut in that moment was like, da 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 da. And she manifested it. And so,
That's a really good distinction that I wasn't even really cluing into was so like the manifesting generator and generators in general need to respond, but that doesn't mean they have to wait or ride the wave because they may not have the emotional authority. So you can be a
exactly.
manifesting generator that is just sacral authority, and therefore you need to respond, but you could respond right away.
Yes. Yeah. And then technically they can still have emotional authority, but maybe the channel isn't connected to that place to the throat. Maybe it's just the sacral to the throat. And the
Okay.
emotions like doing, I don't know, maybe connected to the root, so it's kind of like what what center or options of authority are connected to the throat, which allows for that manifesting energy, the way that the manifesting energy shows itself or is
Yeah,
experienced.
well, so that's really interesting. Like, so then does it affect sort of the quality of or like the fuel for the manifestation? Like, would you say that my
Yeah, that's a
manifestation
good
is
way.
fueled by emotions?
Yeah, yes, exactly.
Mm,
Yeah, like mine is too.
yeah.
Yeah.
And what would be the other kind?
The
Intuition
so
or?
sacral would be a gut response, or for example, if people have it from the G center to the throat, it would be like, say it's a 1-8, it's like their own individual expression, their own individual inspiration, their own creative, oh, I have this creative contribution that I want to share.
Yeah, almost more
That
like
has to
idea.
do with their self
Ah,
because it's
ah.
connected to the G center. So it's like, and G center is the self identity.
Yeah,
So
so
it's more,
just to clarify, like, because G center is located in like where you might consider the heart chakra
yeah, yeah, like the
in another
sternum.
framework. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, so there are nuances.
yeah,
But
there's a
uh,
lot.
but uh, but as a whole, it's like manifesting generators. We can't just walk into a place and be like, blah.
Yeah.
But we can in response to things. So if we walked into that place the second day after sleeping on it with our emotional authority, they say even before you send like a serious text message, sleep on it. Read it again in the morning.
Yeah.
And man, I was just like in hindsight, maybe some of my previous relationships could have, I don't know, maybe dissolved more fluidly or just been a bit more harmonious if I would have just slept on the thing instead of just
And like
saying it.
it's such a perfect example because text messages are so triggering,
I
and like you can't
know.
always read the tone. So
I know
like maybe I
exactly.
should wait on this.
I know.
Another example that
Yeah.
comes to mind is like when I walk into a party, I I don't always feel like this, but I can have a lot of charisma. So like I could just with my energy, with that sort of, let's call it the intimacy
Totally.
archetype, I could just,
I was gonna say it's a 59.
yeah, it's a 59. I could just like,
It's a 59.
power my way into conversation because my energy just radiates out. Like, I know people are looking at me, kind of thing. But
Yeah.
but I need to, be a bit more patient, check in with myself. Where does my, obviously I'm not going to necessarily ride an entire emotional wave at a party. I'm like, wait, I need 3 days to talk to you. But I can at least wait to see if there's a response, kind of thing, right?
Yeah, totally. Feel it out,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, feel out the emotional tone, but also, yeah, see if someone smiles at you or you make eye contact, it's like, yeah, it starts to come naturally once you're aware of it. And then plus the 59-6, it's like you guys are here, especially any 59. It's everyone loves a 59. It's just natural. Like everyone loves
Not everyone,
50.
but
Okay, not everyone, but it just naturally has this energetic that, can create like openings that
attraction.
can
Yeah,
create.
I've found that, I have the other side of the coin where I've needed a lot of alone time and have felt very
That's a
isolated, and
6-2.
yeah, very isolated. And we can get into that next time in the profile. And we have a little bit of that. I'm gonna slice that in, that 6-2 conversation we did from the first episode. But what I've also learned is that when I'm not sort of triggered or like in my trauma response, there is this like magnetism that can be applied.
That's a great word for it. And generators and manifesting generators have an enveloping aura. So each type has a different aura type. I think that's important to share.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So it's like the projectors have more of this like penetrative focused aura. The
And
reflectors
by
more
that you mean like
sampling.
they penetrate others.
Energetically,
Yeah,
yeah.
like it's
Yeah, it's like that's
intense.
the way their aura, yeah. Because that's how they see. I think that's how they're able to see. It's through that, yeah. And then
Yeah.
reflectors are sampling. This is my
Right. They're just
depiction of
they're tasting
sampling.
everything. Everything's flowing through them.
Yeah. And then it's interesting, manifestors are repelling. They have a repelling aura. So this is why some people either love manifestors or they don't. They'll either
Manifestors
attract
are like
the
very
right.
much in their own energy.
Yeah, yeah, kind of. Yeah, it's their own. The manifestor type, I think, generally thrives a lot when they're doing things that are in their own zone, in their own focus.
Yeah.
The unnecessary people getting out of the way. So the necessary people, the generators that are aligned with them, can help.
Yeah.
Support.
Yeah. The people that
And
like
then,
them. The people that
yes, exactly.
appreciate that kind of manifestor energy.
Exactly. And then the generators, manifesting generators, we have an enveloping aura. Yeah, and I was like, I can just naturally feel that too. And it's, there's so many nuances in the chart. It's like if you have the gate 15, your aura is actually twice, I think twice or 3 times more.
Oh, wow.
It goes out to that much more. And I have the 15 too, and the 6. So I've felt that like energetically, just the subtle shifts of me like walking into a space or like how it's perceived, and I can't know this for sure, but just from paying attention, the past few years, I can see the subtleties based off of like one's chart. But anyways, yeah, so there are different aura types
And
that
so
each
when you
type
say
has.
enveloping, you mean like people,
I think like a big
yeah,
hug,
like a
kind
big
of.
hug.
It's
People
like,
can be held contained within it. It can,
yeah.
so it wouldn't be as like penetrating or like acutely intense, but sort of welcoming, join the circle.
Yeah, kind of. And of course, it's like dependent on how the other person perceives it.
Of course.
And whether or not, you made a good point earlier in this little bit you're mentioning, whether or not the manifestor's satisfied or they're frustrated. Because nobody wants to be around a frustrated a generator or manifesting generator. Or I'm sorry, I meant to say, did I say generator or manifestor?
You said
I meant to
manifestor
say,
first.
oh, sorry, I meant to say generator or manifesting generator. Whether the generator or manifesting generator are frustrated,
Because
or if they're
that's,
satisfied.
and so I'll draw this back to something, which is like, so that's well, you can speak to why frustration is important, but it also applies because, correct me if I'm wrong, because to be a generator, a mani-gen, we have a defined, we have that area where the frustration would come from is defined.
Sacral.
Right? Yeah,
Yes.
it's defined, so it's ours. And so therefore it radiates out. And if we're frustrated, others will feel it. right?
Yeah, yes, especially people non-energy types. So for example, projectors or manifestors. Reflectors, it won't affect reflectors as much, but like manifestors will feel it, the projectors will feel it, and I feel like I mean, just the overall, even outside of human design, people can tell, it's a tone of
Yeah, like so
energy.
we can't hide our feelings. Like I'll speak for myself. Like so if I'm excited,
Yeah.
I can light up the room. But if I'm
Hmm.
frustrated, everyone knows. Everyone knows
I
it.
know, I know. And in particular though, for us, for you and I in particular, and anyone else that might have a 2 line in their body, meaning like 6-2 or 5-2, which other ones have twos at the I can't think of anyone's. Yeah, 6-2, 5-2. But if your profile number has a 2
Yeah.
on the right side of it, that more so than not, especially with your emotional authority and your intensity, like, and I've noticed this too, it's like when you're feeling frustrated or emotionally
I
low, and
am
when I
not
get, and
pleasant to be around.
oh yeah, I have the 36 too, so it's like I could feel like how it impacts other people, especially with the line two. You can't with the line two body, you can't hide squat. You really can't. And like I said, more particular for us
Yeah, and I will say
because
like
it's just
for me personally, like I often need to be alone during those times.
yeah,
And, you know, I think
me too.
sometimes this is where human design can potentially help you navigate more traditional, let's call it psychotherapeutic language, because there's often ideas around, oh, you know, you shouldn't be alone with your feelings. You should reach out to help, reach out for help, get support. But it's like sometimes, like for me, I really need to be alone with my stuff because
Yeah, it is.
I'm not gonna be able to communicate well, and I'm not necessarily going to be able to receive well at certain
Yeah.
times.
Yeah. Same. Yeah. Totally. Totally. And it's just that emotional authority too. It's, people who are undefined emotionally, they can feel it. They can, like you walk into a room, it's kind of like this wave of
Yeah.
I imagine it energetically like hits people even if they're turned around. They're just like,
They're like, what?
what's happening
Who just
over
walked into the
there?
room? Was that Magneto? Like,
You know?
what energy is that?
Moody Magneto.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's like I think
Oh, yeah.
it alludes to our power, to our intensity, um, and you know, shadow and a light
I
side to
know.
that.
And the importance of awareness of it. One thing, and I'm digressing a little bit, but it feels important to share with the 6-2 energy, especially. I remember Ross saying a negative role model is still a role model.
Mm.
Yes. And so the other term that comes to mind, this quote
Like
for with
Hitler.
great power. I don't know if he was a 6-2. I think he was like maybe like
Yeah.
2-4 or something. I'd have to check. But no, yeah, no, exactly. But it's like with great power comes great responsibility too.
Right.
And
So
just
you're speaking, we haven't delved into the profiles, but this is based on the different tones we spoke to in the beginning of
mm-hmm.
like there's the 64 hexagrams and then you can have these different six tones. And we probably won't go into it because we're
The
already
yeah, the
the
lines, because
lines.
tones do exist in human design, but it's a
Oh,
totally
okay.
separate
Oh, I
thing.
don't want to
So we
confuse
don't want to
language.
say
So
tones.
they
Yeah,
could
not
they're
the
kind of
tones, the
like
lines.
the comparison would be different
Like
harmonics, like
keys.
yeah, different
Yeah,
keys.
keys.
Not gene keys, but it's just different.
Not
um,
keys.
we'll get into
Keys
that
on a
next
musical
time.
scale.
Yeah. Just different resonances that apply to all the archetypes and which are combined to create a unique what's called profile.
Hmm.
We you and I are both 6'2s. Um, and
Six
so
twos.
you're just yeah, what's up, 6'2s? And so maybe we'll get into, you know, that is a whole nother world as well.
Yeah, I
But
think
that
so.
speaks
Which is
to
important.
very important, just
Yeah,
like I've said,
yeah.
everything else is important too, but
Totally.
that speaks to a very specific composition of how everything else we've been speaking to, the type, the authority, the gates, applies
Yeah.
in the
Hmm.
lines.
Yeah. And essentially the profile number is made up of the line from your conscious and unconscious sun and earth. So when you look at the top of your chart, whatever line that gate
One
was
through
in,
six. It could be one through
one through
six.
six, yep, that's your profile number.
Mm-hmm.
So for us, it's the six, so 59.6, mine's 53.6, and then the two. So for me, it's like the 42.2, and then
Mine is
what's yours?
55.2.
Okay,
So I'm a 59,
55.2.
55.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
I
we
think the
touched a little bit
six
on that.
two. can be its own like video or something too,
Yeah,
for
yeah.
people to, because I think there'll be a lot of people who would want to like look at that.
Yeah,
And so
maybe next time we'll have our body graphs up, and because we're both 6'2s, and we can delve more into that, into profiles. And
cool.
anything, I mean, there's so much more. Like, I wanted to talk
I
about
know.
the cosmology, the
Oh wow, that's a whole other
like the
call.
eons and the great change in
2027.
2027. I
Yeah,
literally
I
I
know.
highlighted it because it's so fascinating. I love
I
that stuff.
know.
The evolution of humanity, of
Totally.
consciousness.
I think I think what's coming up to me when you're saying that is having another call for the lines and profile numbers. It's probably going to be like an hour, hour and a half as it is. And then having another call going into the cosmology 2027. It's funny because a part of me is almost, there's this voice that's like, you're not allowed to speak on that. I'm like, my
Oh,
6'2" is like, watch me,
wait, I'm curious.
watch
Why
me.
it feels like sacred information that's not meant to be?
No, I think it has to do with like the energetic signature and timing of things. And then there's a story of people, of a certain a group of people. Although I don't believe this because I believe that when a person's ego is ready to receive information, it's going to happen. And
Yeah,
if they're not ready to receive it, their ego will reject it or they
right.
won't understand
It's
it.
like they never heard it. In
Exactly.
one
And I'm
ear, out
Sag
the other, as they
rising.
say.
Yeah. And I'm Sag rising. So like the truth is like people need to want to fucking share the truth. Like people deserve to know the truth. And so
Yeah, we
there's
also
that
have almost
layer.
identical astrology too, so.
I know yeah, it's kind of it's kind of wild. And you were born what month again?
August. I was born like 2 months
That's
after you.
right.
But same rising sign, which is very rare because it moves so
Yeah, that
quickly.
is rare. Uh-huh. That is rare. Do you know what degree you have Sagittarius rising in? I'm curious. I'll have to pull up your chart.
Like within seconds, I'm a 0 degree Sagittarius. And I referenced
Ah.
Scorpio energy because, and I know you do this too. I've been drawn to the Vedic
Oh,
framework.
totally.
It just, my guides tell me that's actually more accurate for me in some ways.
Yeah, no, I
So
think so
then we're probably
too.
both Scorpio risings in that sense.
Yeah, I'm
But
under
for
that,
me,
yeah.
because even in the Western frame, I'm like barely 0 degree Sag. It's interesting. I'm like right on the border, the
Wow.
cusp. I have some
Okay.
Scorpio.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'd have to look at I'm curious to see your chart too. Yeah, I think Vedic, well, Vedic is like actually what's happening in the sky.
Right. It just
Like
is
human
technically more accurate for the
it's like
constellations.
literally what's happening.
But you
Yeah,
feel like such an
and
outcast because everyone is talking about the Western
I
frame.
know. Well, I think tropical too, it's like the projection of consciousness of the reality of tropical astrology makes it also real. It's like
That's
it's
such
a
a good
relevant
point.
framework.
I've thought about that. It's like the shared belief system is so strong around the
Yeah.
tropical frame that it's like you wanna it to apply. You're like
Yeah.
everyone's manifesting that reality. So you're like, all right, I might
Mm-hmm.
as well learn from that too.
Totally. And I kind of see tropical as like the external to how we relate to reality, which like human design, right? It's that
It's
feedback
almost like
loop
you're
and
like applying human design tools to astrology, which I like
yeah.
because it's like
Uh-huh.
it almost, because you said you're someone who likes to bridge the gaps. I love that too. So it's like you'll
Hmm.
take some of those tools and apply it to how you can see Vedic and tropical.
Yeah, totally. And Vedic, I feel like, is more soul. Vedic's more like maybe the expression of our soul versus our
Like
expression of our
beyond,
character,
yeah, almost like
you know?
across incarnations kind of.
Kind of, because I don't know if I really bel
You're not speaking to
I
that level of like soul realm kind of.
well, I think that has to also still do with our genetics. It still has to do with our form.
Okay, okay.
I think the information of a being that moves across lifetimes or a form and ego that moves
Yeah.
across lifetime has to do with our actual physical form in a way, so it's connected.
Interesting.
But yeah, but I think there's like an essence there, maybe another layer in between the soul and the body
Yeah,
that
almost like a middle ground. Almost like what
yes.
someone, I think what someone referred to as the energy body, as like a middle ground between
Yeah.
soul, complete non-physical soul aspect,
Mm-hmm.
and physical form.
Yeah. Yeah.
That
So maybe
carries
like
information from other
yes.
incarnations.
Uh-huh. And it makes sense, energy body being attuned to what's actually happening.
Yeah, energy, it's like the bridge between physical and the non-physical.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that I like that. That can apply more to Vedic,
Yeah.
your Vedic astrology.
Yeah. I don't know how we got to that. I
Yeah,
think you had
this
asked
was
a
all
question.
this was all in service of like this was also almost like the backstage conversation we were gonna have when I ended the recording. But I'm probably just gonna include all this because I think it's fun. But so yeah, so we'll wrap up here, and I'll
Yeah.
just say, is there anything else you'd like to? I mean, we covered a bunch, but you'd like to say to wrap up this more introductory foundational conversation on human design?
Well, I'm recapping to see if there's anything that I might have missed in regards to the types that we just mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I covered it pretty well. I guess the only thing is similar to what I said in the beginning. Like even amongst all this information, which I feel like information helps guide us closer to maybe the ever moving, ever evolving truth
Right.
in a way.
The ever shifting target that we're seeking.
Yeah, exactly. And at the same time, it's like the experience of that does apply. And when we look back in retrospect in our lives, so it's all necessary. And encouraging people to trust themselves more, and not from like well, it's funny, I was going to say, not from an impulsive place, even though that's more splenic, maybe if you're supposed to, but it's like trusting yourself from a place of loving yourself.
Yeah.
Like, and learning to love the nuances of all of you, and the highs and the lows, and the things that you don't understand, the things that you might not like, the things that you kind of would like to be different, and striving to find what would be considered in Gene Key's terms, the light
The light. Yeah.
in
The gift,
in
right?
the shadow aspects. Yes, the gift in the shadow aspects. I feel like Gene Keys will have to be a whole separate
That's going to
thing
be,
too.
yeah, a whole nother thing. A whole nother thing.
Yeah, it deserves its own
It
thing
does.
as
It
well.
deserves its own space. Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Trishana, for
Yeah.
responding to my invitation, to my ask, and to the beautiful I don't even know, like, temple that we're building, temple of
Mm.
information, temple of like layers, foundational layers that we're building, and excited to see where it will go from here.
Yeah, likewise. You're so very welcome, and gratitude to you as well for creating this beautiful container and this safe space for the 59,
Yeah, it's my gift. It's my
intimacy,
gift.
and the connection, and allowing just myself and many others to be vulnerable and sharing their truths and their insight. And yeah, this awesome feedback loop too that allows all this information to come out. So
Yeah,
yeah, gratitude.
I love it. It's my honor and pleasure. Um, and I trust I will talk to you again soon, and we will do this again soon.
Yes, looking forward to it.
Thanks for listening. If you liked the episode and would like to support the podcast, please subscribe and leave a review anywhere you listen. And if you'd like to connect further, feel free to reach out on Instagram, my website, or my Patreon page at patreon.com/Dr. Daniel Atkins, where for $5 a month, you can gain access to all sorts of exclusive benefits and offerings for the Be the Vessel community. This includes live channeled events, a new healing series podcast, and more. Until then, may you be the light, the frequency, and the vessel for your highest vision.